Hey, this is Robbie McKenzie, Youth Ministry 6.3. Nehemiah 6 verse 3 says, "You are doing a great work and you cannot come down." I'd like to invite you to another episode. We have Wayne Jacobsen from Lifestream. Wayne wrote a number of good books. He wrote Authentic Relationships, and he wrote one of his most popular books, So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore. Wayne and I talk about how to have authentic relationships in a community, specifically in the context of church. And so you're going to enjoy this interview. Thank you so much for joining in. I appreciate you so much. Comment below and let me know how these interviews are turning out. Tune in next week. We have a really great interview next week as well, and I know you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much. This is Robbie McKenzie, Youth Ministry 6.3. That comes from Nehemiah 6 verse 3, where Nehemiah said, "I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down." I have with me the one and only Wayne Jacobsen. Wayne agreed to interview with me, talking about relationships, and specifically stemming from his book, Authentic Relationships. He's written, I've noticed, a number of books. 3 of them I've read at least. I've read He Loves Me, Learning to Live in the Father's Love, and then one of my favorites, unfortunately as a youth minister, is So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore. I thought that was an interesting dialogue there. Enjoyed that and can resonate with some of the conversations there. And so we're talking about authentic relationships. So Wayne, I appreciate you being on so much.
Well, you're welcome, Robert. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Wayne, you are presently in an organization, I believe it's called Lifestream, where you lead groups, or at least you lead in discussions about relationships. Kind of tell us about what you do there and what God has done with you over there, if you don't mind.
Lifestream, just the cover name we use for my life. My life goes in a lot of different directions in terms of doing some writing and speaking. We've got some audio and video online to help people grow in this journey, and Lifestream just kind of the umbrella we do that under.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. How did that come about? I'm just curious. I've read sort of your bio there, but sort of an interesting journey that you were on.
It's been a very interesting journey in a lot of fronts, but yeah, Lifestream came into existence just realizing my life was kind of outgrowing the church I was pastoring, and I think they reached that conclusion before I did and kicked me out. But Lifestream became just the name. I didn't want to have WayneJacobsen.com
right,
and make my name a big deal, so we kind of just landed on the word Lifestream and felt like we just wanted to give life to people who were wanting to grow in a journey with God and not necessarily get hooked into all the religious components that we sometimes add to that.
Sure, absolutely. We're talking about relationships here, and one thing that youth ministers are good with, we're usually good with relational ministry, but so often we struggle, though, because we're really not good at having relationships ourselves. Why do you suppose that's the case? Why do we struggle with having relationships?
Well, that'd probably be an individual answer for every person you could pose that question to. I think in general, our religious environment, particularly a youth minister's role in a church, is usually a performance-based role. It's usually not hired to have good relationships with kids. They're usually hired to have a program that's effective, that attracts kids. And I think it particularly comes from parents who are fearful they're losing their kids to the faith, and they want a youth director to kind of draw them back in.
Right.
And you get graded for the programs you run, and unfortunately, you don't always get graded for the relationships you're building and the time you're spending with individual kids, because I may appreciate you spending time with my kid, but if you're spending time with someone else's kid, I want you doing stuff for mine, and I think that becomes a conflict.
Absolutely. What do you think? How are we in churches in general at having authentic relationships with each other?
I don't think we do well at all. Unfortunately, I think our Sunday morning gatherings, which is kind of the main gathering for any group of people that kind of usually call themselves a church,
right,
it's not designed for people to be authentic. You're supposed to pretend a bit when you come here. You dress up, you kind of put a smile on your face. We don't have time for hurting, broken people here. We're trying to, again, do a program. That program's got to have certain entertainment values, and your need is not entertaining. So I think it's a bad deal all around. Rare are the groups you find that you go among where you find people really living authentically with each other in that environment. It's mostly going on outside that environment.
Absolutely. We talk about how Jesus had a lot of followers. Jesus had the disciples, and then Jesus had what some would call the close-knit three, Peter, James, and John. Now, whether you buy into that or not, do you think that in order to become closer we must become smaller?
Well, it certainly helps. I think Jesus, when I come out away from the Gospels, Jesus wasn't trying to build anything.
Right.
You don't have him trying to build an organization or write a book or accomplish some kind of objective. He is just hanging out with people. And he did feel the freedom when hundreds of people are lining the street in Jericho to see him.
Oh, yeah.
He chooses Zacchaeus to go to lunch. And
Yep.
to me, that's just an amazing thing. We almost always think in terms of crowds, and Jesus is always thinking about the individual, the woman. He saw no problem being a little closer to Peter, James, and John than he was to 12. He didn't try to spread his time out evenly with everybody, and I think he lived by a different priority than we do.
Absolutely. We talked about maybe the church gathering. That could be a possibility that keeps us from just the way we've set up church, I guess, that keeps us from building positive relationships. What are some other things that, just in general, that keep Christians from building positive relationships?
Well, I think it's the desire to be liked. We learned in kindergarten that to be liked, you have to conform to the expectations of whatever crowd you're in. And if you're conforming to expectations, you're not being real. I had someone say to me one time, after being very involved in the church, even I was pastoring, saying, I don't have a friend in this church, and they were just crying their eyes out. And I just looked at them and said, you know why? And they said, no. And I said, because you've never had this conversation with anyone.
Right.
I said, I know 100 women in this group that would come around you, but you present this image of being the perfect, your kids are in order, your house is in order, you work so hard to project an image that people don't know the real you, but letting them in on the real us is a bit of a risk. People may not like what they see.
Absolutely.
And I think the only way we have the freedom to do that is to learn to live inside an authentic relationship with Jesus first. There's a little chorus we used to sing when I was growing up, the one who knows me best loves me most. And that's God's kind of loving. I think in the world sometimes it's the least we know each other, the better we can love somebody, because we're not generally patient with weakness, and we're not ready to deal with someone's garbage. We'd rather just, say I'm fine, look good, and I'm happy with that. So I think the challenges are not only religious in nature, I think they're just personal in nature. I want to be liked more than I want to be real sometimes, and that has an impact.
Absolutely. Sometimes, I read a book by Mark Yaconelli called Contemplative Youth Ministry, and he talked about that we're so busy, like you alluded to, in performance ministry. We're so busy doing things that we forget to be things. And so he talks about practicing more of a contemplative, where we're trying to foster our own spiritual relationship and everything growing out of that. Do you see contemplative approach to ministry being a more effective way at approaching things and that affecting our relationships as well?
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Contemplative travels with a lot of baggage on it, so I'm not sure exactly how people define it.
Sure.
I think it is true that until I have a relationship with God in which I know I'm loved by Him right where I'm at, with my struggles, my doubts, my fears, my brokenness, if I don't have an assurance in the Father's love for me, I'm not going to know how to love you or how to be open with you or how to risk anything with you. Because the sense is, if I'm not loved by you, I'm going to be lost. And if I've got my love from the Father, the whole John 13, 34, 35, where Jesus said, I'm going to give you a new command, which I'm thinking, okay, now this is important. This is something you want to pay attention to, because we're going this way from now on, and that is love one another as I have loved you. So if we don't know how He loves us, I don't have a clue how to love you. But what I'm finding now in my life, the first half of my ministry was always based on the programs and things I was doing. Now, the most effective ministry I have is in conversations with people. And I just came back from a trip in the Midwest. And there are times when I speak and 56 watch me kind of dialogue with that. But I'll even say to them, the best conversation I'll have today won't be here in front of this group. It'll be having lunch, talking with some of you coming in and out of attending here, how we connect elsewhere during the day, because that's when you're down off of just, here's thoughts to discuss, but now here's people to know, and that makes the difference.
Absolutely. We talk about community often, and I guess in a ministry setting, speaking just about the minister alone, it's tough to find good people we can be authentic with. It's tough to, specifically in our own church context, but how important is it for other ministers to connect together, and the idea of community amongst ministers, how important is that for our sanity?
Again, may depend on the person. I think having healthy relationships throughout our life, with peers, with people, with folks we think are beneath us, which I hope there aren't any of those, but
Sure.
sometimes there are. I think having healthy relationships across the board is key. In fact, the first church I was on staff at and hired as a youth guy, I was told not to have any friends in the congregation because it would only breed jealousy. I mean, that was the edict from the pastor. I ignored it because if I get fired for this, that's cool. But I only understand the ministry of Jesus in terms of a growing celebration of friendship and being known. And that doesn't always depend on whether that other person is safe enough for me to be real. It really depends on whether I feel safe enough in the Father to be real, even with people that might misuse it. Certainly, Jesus' vulnerabilities were greatly misused by other people.
How do we talk about, you talk about positive relationships and healthy relationships. How do we, just speaking in terms of general Christians, how do we develop and maintain those positive relationships amongst our people here?
Yeah, and again, the question, our people, I think confuses it a bit. Sarah and I ask the question every week, and we did this also when we were pastoring. Sarah's my wife. And that is, God, who do you want us to connect with this week? Who do you want us to be with? And I think when a group tries to produce community, it focuses on the things that it's doing. I think when the individuals in a group say, gosh, who's God calling me to walk near this week? And who do I want to spend time with over lunch or a phone call or, trading some kind of exchange? And I think it's the multiplicity of those exchanges that make up the network of our relationships. And I've done home groups and things in churches where if it's just people coming to the event for the program, community's not going to happen. If it's people that are willing to invest their lives in each other apart from the meeting, then that's where community begins to take some kind of hold.
We're always looking, last question, Wayne, I appreciate this interview. We're always looking for resources. What are some resources other than your book? What are some resources that could help us out when it comes to relationship building?
Yeah, you sent me this question earlier. I know even now people are going to think about what books, what tapes, what resources that way. I just finished writing an article on my website called Quiet Lives of Profound Significance. And I get asked all the time, what books most shaped your life, Wayne? And my answer is, it hasn't been books. It's been people. I know an incredible amount of people, not only locally, but now because of my travels around the world, who are deeply living in this authentic journey. And I think the best resource someone has is finding someone like that. And I think in asking the question, who around me do I see having the kind of healthy relationships I want to have? And this even asking them, hey, could I hang out with you a bit? Could I learn some of what you know? Because I think the best resource in the body, which is why Jesus didn't leave us a book. He left us with 11 transformed lives, or maybe 120, depending on how you want to count them. And he left Jericho with that Zacchaeus guy. He was different after Jesus spent lunch with him. And so I think the biggest resource is people. If you're asking about my website, I think you mentioned Authentic Relationships, which I think is a great book for how to do community. It kind of hangs on the first book, which is He Loves Me, which is how do we live loved by the Father? Because if we don't learn that, then I think all of our attempts at authentic relationships are just going to be human effort, and they are going to fail, and they are going to disappoint us to some degree. So I say, first of all, people, older brothers and sisters who you respect their life and you love the relationships they get to have with people. Find out how they're doing that. And then secondly, there might be some of those things from the website that will be helpful.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Wayne, for doing this. Hang on a little bit.
No problem.
This is another episode of Youth Ministry 6.3 with Wayne Jacobsen. Thank you so much, Wayne.
You're welcome. Thank you.